Good morning, everyone. As always, here is your weekly podcast, Knowledge Empowerers. With you is me, Kat. 안녕하세요. Then we have Baruch.
Hello.
And we have Kolac.
Dobre ráno, good morning, everyone.
And I need to, guys, share with you one super word that I've learned, which is mochida. And it means like awesome. So
mochida.
As of mochida, it sounds like, to me, it sounds more Japanese than Korean, but it's such an awesome word, mochida. AKA awesome.
This is what I will be saying today. When Kolac will be explaining today's topic.
Yeah, I will. Should I?
No, it's actually, look, it's actually very nice touch, because every time I learn a word, these guys needs to be very empathetic towards me, or at least they are pretending they are. So they will listen to me, the brand new words I've learned. And so that's a very nice start to talk about the empathy.
Yeah, we'll listen to you and encourage you. So yeah, the empathy, because we were talking before about the first parts of the empathy, or first parts of the emotional intelligence, which was first self-recognition of the emotions, then about self-regulation, then about recognition of others' emotions, and the fourth part, which is like management of it all, that's the empathy. So that's the fourth part of the emotional intelligence. So first of all, let's define it. I like these definitions because, you know, it breaks the ice by aligning ourselves when it comes to the language. So we define our common language here. So guys, what do you think what the empathy is?
It is an ability to feel, or at least deduce what the other people are feeling.
Okay. Sympathize with them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sympathize. What is sympathize?
What am I, at school or what?
Yes, you are.
Just say it.
No, I want to give it a minute of thinking
it's
behind
like,
this.
I'm literally thinking whenever I had a talk with anyone, it's like that I'm really more open to listening and trying to understand what the other person is trying to tell me from the feelings perspective as well as from the words perspective. And really, before even providing solutions, it's more like, do you just want me to listen to you, or do you want me to provide you some solutions or help? Because sometimes it's just only about that the person wants to talk.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's nice.
I think that's interesting. Is it, Kolac? Maybe you don't have an answer, but is empathy also not just like how you perceive the feelings of others, but also what you do about them?
What do you mean by what you do about them?
Like if you act on that knowledge that you have of others, or is that already or emotional intelligence?
Well, I think that you Baruch are adding a nice touch to that with this acting on it. That's one of the parts of the empathy. So there is a difference between empathy and sympathy, because sympathizing with somebody is something else than empathizing with someone. Sympathy is about
mochida.
In this case, you should say chincha, which means really. Chincha.
So sympathy is that you are there in the conversation with the other person, but you are staying on your own island. You are not crossing towards the other person. So that's the difference, I would say, between the empathy and sympathy. So empathy is that you partially also not just understand, but you experience the other's feelings. So that's beyond understanding, beyond just like thinking about it, like, oh, that's something.
So people who are very logical, do they like empathy? Or yes. By nature?
by nature, everybody from nature, everybody is empathizing with someone.
Even our politicians?
Well, yeah, because empathy is a natural instinct for us, because we want to survive, and empathy is something what brings us into the community, brings us into the group, because we can empathize with somebody else, and that keeps us alive. So that's evolutionary view on empathy, how it evolved or why it stays with us. The thing is that we don't empathize with everyone. That's the different thing, like you said that there are some groups you don't like and you don't empathize with them. So empathy is built a lot about what we have in common and on the likeness of each other.
But there are psychopaths, right? So not everybody.
True. Those 2%, sorry for excluding you. So yeah, psychopaths are really a rare case, but that's also for sociopaths. I would say that these two groups are excluded because they are not the general normal. There are really like brain issues which causes that the empathy is not working. So,
but there are many exceptions, I think. I don't mean just psychopaths, for example.
And you can go by names, right? You can name these guys. Like who?
Okay, so it's John.
John, yeah. Peter.
Out of the 7 billion, it's like, John, how could you?
No, I mean even guys that have some like the Asperger's, and I think there's
Autism
a new
or something.
yeah,
Name some more of those people who have brain damage.
It's
Definitely
not the damage, but even
It
autism is like range, right? So
I'm sure, but it means that the brain doesn't have certain connections.
Yep.
Yeah, but that's why they're called atypical, because they don't fall under the norm. But the more we learn, the more we discover that there are more. The normal is not as common as we think.
So while Baruch is focusing on the 1%
Okay.
of the
It's not
people,
No, it's not 1%. Yeah, it's not
Kolac
1%.
is trying
True.
to cover the over 90%.
True. But then again, like Baruch, when we are talking about all those cases, which are not in these terms normal, or I would say that it's pretty normal to meet them. That's not what I meant by being normal. By normal, I mean that psychology works in 90% of those, and there are a lot of exceptions when a lot of neurological things don't work properly in all of these people, and that's not a normalization. That's not what I try to say by that. It's just that when we take the average random person, random Joe on the street, there is a high chance that he can empathize, and it's not one of those cases like.
Maybe the reason why I'm defending these small groups so much, and why I'm trying to, I don't think they're as uncommon. For example, the reason I think I'm not naturally empathetic person. I don't think I was born as empathetic person. I remember me as a kid. I think in kids you can see it like very natural leaning to being empathetic, because kids don't care how they are perceived by society, right? So they will act naturally.
That's not true.
Okay.
Kids are really dependent on their parents, even mothers. So they actually take a huge part of what is happening in the family and projecting it on themselves. So they are really empathetic, a lot empathetic. So that's why I think that you saying that you are not empathetic is a mismatch. It's something mismatch, because you are here. If you weren't empathetic, I guess that you wouldn't be born properly or raised properly. So,
well, I am empathetic now, but it's I think it's more learned than natural.
That's actually a good question. That's actually a good point. So, what sort of learned and inborn empathy do you, or what are the parts? Because we were mentioning, okay, so born one, learned one. What are the parts of the empathy? Is it consisting of something?
I think one is awareness of other people in general. Like there are people like me who often, like I think a lot of introverts, they're focused on themselves a lot. So when you basically kind of like phase out all the environment around you and people, of course you are not empathetic because you don't notice people and how they feel. So it's hard to be empathetic. Maybe you have that kind of ability in you, but if you don't notice, how you are supposed to be empathetic, right? So I think at least this is my case. When I was a kid, I was like, all right, well, this is me, and if I don't feel sad in these situations, why should anyone? So I just, you know, I just don't notice, like, if, for example, kid would fall and it would cry, and I would be like, why is the kid crying? It's not such a terrible thing. It's not the end of the world, right? I remember one time, like my thinking as a kid, this was like preschool age, and we went to a doctor, and she said like, oh, don't be afraid, we're just going to, like, they were going to inject some, I don't know, some vaccine or something in me. And I don't remember a doctor doing that to me before. So she was like, oh, don't worry, like, it's going to be okay. And I'm looking at her like, why are you like saying this to me? Like, I don't know how it's going to be. You are preparing me for something terrible by revealing it's terrible. But I don't know it's terrible. Like, so, and they injected me. I was like, okay, this wasn't so terrible. Well, what they were preparing me for? Like, and she was like, oh my God, you're such a good kid. Like, but I was like, what was this about? So yeah, this was my thinking as a kid, and still is, basically.
Mm-hmm. What I see here is that, what I hear from you is that when something is about to happen, or happened actually in this case, like for the kid, you couldn't emotionally relate to that. Like, why is that situation bad, right?
I could. I assume it's going to hurt.
Assumed. Okay. Assumed.
It's not like to me it was just unnatural to do something in advance, to like react emotionally in advance. Like most of the kids, they will see needle and they will cry like, oh my God.
That's actually a nice example of empathy.
But have you ever watched a kid that fell and their reaction? Have you watched it carefully? And right now I don't mean if they really hurt themselves, but if they just fell, their immediate reaction is not cry.
Yeah, it's like surprise.
No, their immediate reaction is actually they look at their either parents or whoever is with them, and depending on the reaction of the parent, that's how they're gonna react. If the parent is like, oh my God, what happened? Then they start crying. If the parent is like, what's up, buddy? Let's move on. They just go, okay. And if the parent is not even watching, the kid just stands up and like nothing happened. So it's very interesting. And I don't think it has anything to do with empathy. It's just that's the way they're learning. So
that's the connection.
And they're applying then that reaction based on what the other person is projecting.
I saw this beautiful picture when there was this actually parents and a kid, and there is this huge meteorite which drops on the kid and really like hits it, and the kid and mother was like, oh no, what's gonna happen? I'm like, oh, our kid. And the father was like, no, wait. And the kid just like scrambled from beneath the meteor, like and father was like, hey buddy, and the kid, have you seen that? And totally fine, nothing happened, like no crying in the church, like, see, he's indestructible. So, unless you give them the emotion, that happens. Yeah, true. But what Baruch, what you were describing, that the kids start crying when the other kids are, when one kid is crying, that's sort of the connected empathy, and that's the emotional relation towards that. That's the emotional part of the empathy. The other thing that is that there is this strong cognitive empathy, something which you are training a lot. And there is one part which you mentioned totally at the beginning, that's a needed part of the empathy, is acting on it. So it's not just that you feel what the others are feeling, that you know what they are going through, and that you can imagine it or somehow project it, imagine it. but also that you act on it. So like say, oh, that's tough. I'm sorry to hear that, or sorry for your troubles or whatever. So that's it. And I think that when you see the kid fell and you can't project those emotions, that's good for therapy. Just saying, you know.
Be a psychopath. A sociopath.
No. Because that there might be a lot of things. It doesn't necessarily need to be it's not nothing related to psychopaths. Because the case you described with the doctors, like, oh, you are a good girl that you didn't cry, and don't worry because it's not that. There is so much more than just empathy. There is a lot of bias and assumptions taking place, which might not be healthy when you are dealing with kids, because as you said, like, oh, don't worry, it's going to be fine. This reassurance could be troublesome for some because you already set up the expectations, or that it might, because the kid hears that it's going to be troublesome, because they don't hear it isn't going to be, they hear it is troublesome. So that's how our brain works. So yeah, that's the empathy. And we were starting to describe some of the barriers, because you were mentioning, like, okay, you didn't feel empathetic towards the kid, but that's totally fine, because there are natural barriers. We don't want to be empathetic with everyone. We can't, because empathy is taking a lot of energy, mental and physical, because you are going through those same emotions basically as the other person, and that's taking a heavy toll on your organism. So it's natural. That's when some random kid drops and starts crying, you don't start crying as well. That's a really good instinct. You don't want to do that because when you see that you are in a bus of 42 people, you don't want to relate and empathize with every single person there.
It's also for therapy, right?
No, yeah, if you do that's gonna be good for therapy. No, it's totally good how you react, because there are those natural barriers, because you see that you don't know the person. There are differences. The respect could be another one. You know, like the natural respect between you and the other person is not built. So you don't have this empathy. That's why we have competition, because otherwise we would die out. And this natural competition helps us. If we compete with someone else over barriers or berries in the history, and we empathize all the time, we will probably die, you know, like.
So we are also naturally unempathetic.
Of course, basically. Of course. Okay. Yeah, that's true. We are naturally unempathetic. Like, you can switch it off. That's the thing, you know, like it helps you survive, and it's naturally inbuilt, but you can turn it off, and you don't need to. And I would say you shouldn't be empathetic like all the time, because that's gonna kill you.
At least mentally.
Switch off.
Switch off. Yeah. It's good. And Katya, you mentioned that you sometimes ask, like, what you need, if you want just to listen, or if you want to help, or like some problem solution. That's a great question too. Like, okay, I see that. Okay, starting with empathy. Oh, that's troublesome. And then the question, like, okay, so do you want to do something about it, or like, how can I help you? Is a really great question about that, and to see how the conversation is going to run, whether it's just about just being there and listening, or proposing solutions, because that's the toughest situation. So we can do a small exercise, and we can see what is the best reaction. Okay, so imagine the situation that you are at work, almost at the end of the hours, and at the day of business day, and your boss comes and says, like, I need this presentation to be finished for tomorrow, or this job to be done for tomorrow morning, so you need to stay late and you need to do it today. And you had different plans which you need to cancel, some partner, husband, wife waiting for you at home. And this is this situation which you go away and you meet a friend and you talk about the situation to your friend. I had this boss, you know, and he forced me to stay, and I did it already 2 times. You say everything about you have about this. and there are multiple ways how you can react as a friend, you know, and one of those could be like, oh, and have you tried to speak to that boss, and have you tried this, and would you mind trying this? What's your reaction?
Makes
you angry. Wow. True.
You're supposed to be on my side.
Yeah. The other thing could be that there is reaction about like, this anger might be coming from your childhood because you had a strong paternalistic relationship with your father. Okay.
That's when I'm strangling you already. Crossing you through out of my friends list.
True. And there are various reactions like that, like various ways how we can react. So what would be the optimal reaction? How would you react?
Such a bad boss. How could he? Or she.
Okay.
Or you can just listen. You don't need to react.
Okay, no need to react. Just listen. Okay.
What I would say is, how would that make me feel? Like, I would be so frustrated in your situation.
Okay. Cool. Those are nice reactions, and that's actually appropriate ones, I would say, among those really appropriate ones. Because I would avoid like, I would be so frustrated. I would go, because that's already some sort of leads to a bit of sympathy, that you start talking about yourself, which is not really the point of the conversation. We want to talk, when we come to empathy, we want to talk about the other person's situation. And so
but usually it leads back to the person. I mean, the person really starts to talk about them anyway. So
that's good. Yeah, that's the strong emotion.
But this is the fun part, that it's something I've learned, that when I have the conversation, that's when I need to tell it out loud, like in my brain, that this is not about me, it's about the person. Don't you dare to switch the conversation to yourself. Listen. And it's hard. It's like super hard, but it's something I've realized that we have it, and I had to like stop it. But I wanted to say, it just recently happened to me. So when I do the exercising with girls, and I've got another trainer there, and I was telling her like, oh girl, I just lost 2 kilos, and she was like, but you know that the only thing that went out of you is water. And it literally made me angry without even wanting it, but I've immediately what's the word I'm looking for, like I immediately realized the emotion that it's triggering, and I was like, girl, right now you're supposed to sympathize with me and just go, that's a cool girl. And she was like, oh, Ken, I am so sorry, it's just early morning. You are right, you lost 2 kilos, let's celebrate. And she was like, I'm so sorry.
This is how I'm naturally, like I'm all about facts. Like I don't care like about like, if you know how it's not, I don't care. Now I care, but before, my natural reaction would be facts.
No, your
like
reaction, Baruch, is when I would say I lost 2 kilos, you go, awesome. That's your reaction. It's not like, really? And how? And based on what? What did you eat? What you did? No, you just go, that's awesome, because you feel with me.
Yes, that should be my reaction, and now would probably be that reaction, but in the past it wouldn't be my reaction.
Yeah, okay.
I'm gonna send you some links, Baruch. And with this, I would like to close this podcast because we will dedicate one more session, and we will talk more about the details, what happened actually there, and what are the empathetic cues, clues, what you can do, and to become more empathetic. So we will hear more about the barriers, list them or talk about them, and then like how to bypass them. So how to be more empathetic in the details.
Are we going to find out more about Baruch, that what kind of a friend we have?
Actually, we can. Everybody has some sort of communication under the stress. I'm the funny guy. Baruch, you seem like super rational, so that's the thing. And Kat, you will be and Kat, you will be probably also the clown there. So like me. So so we can do a podcast about it as well.
Oh no, I'm sick next time.
Guys, 수고하셨습니다.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Ciao, ciao.
This podcast represents our own opinions, experience, and our own ideas. We do not represent any official statement from our employers, and this is not their official channel representing the company.